March 3, 1943. The vast, shimmering expanse of the Bismarck Sea lay calm, seemingly benevolent. On its surface, a Japanese convoy under the command of Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura cut a confident path towards Lae, New Guinea. 14 ships strong, 8 troop transports, each brimming with vital reinforcements and supplies, accompanied by 8 escorting destroyers, steamed purposefully through the tropical waters. Kimura, a seasoned officer whose career was etched in the traditions of imperial naval might, surveyed his charges with an unwavering sense of purpose. His orders were clear: deliver these men and material to the beleaguered garrison at Lae, a critical strategic point in the fierce struggle for the Southwest Pacific. The Japanese Imperial Navy, steeped in a doctrine of swift, decisive action and an almost unshakable belief in their defensive capabilities, saw little to truly fear from the skies. Their anti-aircraft guns, they believed, were robust enough to repel any conventional aerial assault. Their formidable Zero fighters, poised on nearby airfields, stood ready to intercept any bombers or torpedo planes that dared approach. This was, in their minds, a mission of routine strategic importance, a necessary link in their island defense chain, a task they were more than equipped to handle. What Admiral Kimura, and indeed the entire Japanese High Command, could not possibly have known was that this meticulously planned voyage was not merely a logistical operation. It was a date with destiny, a grim rendezvous with a nightmare forged not in the distant workshops of naval strategy, but in the improvisational ingenuity of Allied airmen. They were sailing headlong into a maelstrom of steel and fire, an aerial weapon unlike anything they had ever conceived. The tranquil blue of the Bismarck Sea was about to be stained with the indelible crimson of a new kind of warfare, a true nightmare from the cockpit that would forever alter the calculus of naval power. At that moment, as the American airmen prepared for a hellish dawn, the Imperial Japanese Navy sailed with a deep-seated confidence, their doctrine hardened by years of naval supremacy and early Pacific victories. To Admiral Kimura and his officers, the convoy represented not vulnerability, but a formidable fortress at sea. Their ships, from the nimble destroyers to the lumbering transports, were bristling with anti-aircraft guns, 25mm autocannons, 13mm machine guns, and even larger caliber weapons, all manned by crews meticulously trained in the traditional art of naval air defense. Their established doctrine, refined through countless drills and actual engagements, was predicated on the belief that conventional high-altitude bombing and torpedo runs, the primary threats posed by Allied aircraft, could be effectively repelled. Japanese naval architects had even integrated layered defenses into their ship designs, believing their vessels could absorb significant damage. They envisioned a defensive umbrella where fighters would intercept attackers at long range, and any aircraft that dared to penetrate would be shredded by a storm of flak and tracer fire from the surface. This unwavering faith in their anti-aircraft capabilities, in their doctrine, in their very steel, created an almost impenetrable shield of overconfidence. They had seen Allied bombers before, slow and predictable, easily swatted from the skies. What could possibly surprise them? What could possibly overcome such a well-drilled, well-armed force? This hubris, however, would soon be shattered, setting the stage for a brutal awakening to a new, terrifying reality. But in the crucible of the Pacific, where the odds often seemed insurmountable, innovation was not just a luxury, it was a desperate necessity. While the Japanese convoy steamed confidently, an answer was being forged in the unlikely workshops of Australia, driven by the vision of one audacious American officer. This was the domain of Major Paul "Pappy" Gunn. Pappy Gunn was no ordinary airman. He was a maverick, a tactical genius frustrated by the limitations of conventional bombing against hardened naval targets. He understood that high-altitude bomb runs, while safer for the crews, yielded dismal accuracy against moving ships. What was needed was direct, overwhelming firepower, delivered at an altitude where every bullet counted. He envisioned an aircraft that could not merely drop bombs, but tear ships apart with a storm of lead. His audacious solution involved the versatile B-25 Mitchell bomber, a machine primarily designed for medium-altitude bombing. Pappy Gunn, working with his dedicated ground crews in the steamy, makeshift airfields of northern Australia, began an unauthorized yet utterly transformative modification. He stripped away non-essential weight and, most crucially, equipped the bomber with an unprecedented array of 8 forward-firing 50-caliber machine guns. 4 were mounted in the nose, locked rigidly forward, turning the bomber's glass front into a hardened, aggressive snout. Another 2 were added to the lower fuselage, and 2 more were cleverly integrated into gun pods on the sides of the fuselage. This wasn't just an upgrade, it was a radical metamorphosis. The B-25, once a medium bomber, was reborn as a dedicated strafer, a flying gun platform designed for low-level, head-on assaults. Each bullet from those 8 heavy machine guns, traveling at devastating speeds, could rip through the unarmored superstructures of destroyers and transport ships, shredding communications, disabling anti-aircraft emplacements, and creating utter chaos among personnel on deck. Pappy Gunn's vision was clear: to turn the B-25 into the ultimate anti-shipping weapon, a harbinger of destruction that would rewrite the rules of naval air combat. The relentless fury of the B-25 strafer, envisioned by Pappy Gunn, was a terrifying proposition for any enemy vessel. But even this unprecedented aerial firepower needed a finishing blow, a means to truly sink a ship, not just cripple its deck. This critical piece of the puzzle came from another brilliant mind, a man named Major William Benn. Benn, a tactician with a keen understanding of naval vulnerabilities, recognized the inherent challenges of conventional high-altitude bombing against agile targets at sea. Bombs dropped from above often missed, or, at best, caused superficial damage to the deck. He sought a method to exploit a ship's most vulnerable point, its hull, below the waterline. His answer was deceptively simple, yet utterly revolutionary: skip bombing. Imagine a stone thrown low across a pond, skimming the surface before hitting its mark. That was the essence of Benn's technique. Bombers, often the very same B-25s, would descend to an astonishingly low altitude, mast height, sometimes even lower, and release their bombs. Instead of plunging vertically, these bombs, released at high speed and flat trajectory, would literally skip across the water like deadly projectiles. The kinetic energy, combined with the precise angle of impact, would send them slamming into the ship's side, often below the waterline. This wasn't merely deck damage, this was a torpedo-like strike, tearing open the hull, flooding compartments, and striking at the very structural integrity of the vessel. The brilliance lay in its complementary nature. Pappy gun strafers would sweep in first, their 8 forward-firing machine guns raking the decks, silencing anti-aircraft fire, and sowing panic among the crew. They were the shock troops, clearing the way. Then, in their wake, came the skip bombers, delivering the coup de grace. This 1-2 punch was devastating. The strafers blinded and incapacitated, the skip bombers delivered the fatal wound. Together, they transformed the B-25 from a conventional medium bomber into a precision anti-shipping weapon of unparalleled lethality. The synergy was complete. The Japanese convoy sailing towards New Guinea was about to face not just a new weapon, but an entirely new form of aerial warfare.
General George Kenney, a man whose strategic vision often bordered on prescience, commanded the 5th Air Force in the crucible of the Pacific. He watched the unfolding conflict with a keen, analytical eye, understanding that conventional tactics alone would not suffice against a determined and well-entrenched foe. It was within this context that he observed the independent innovations of Major Paul Pappy Gunn and Major William Benn. Kenney, with the mind of a true architect of war, saw beyond their individual brilliance. He recognized the profound synergy waiting to be unleashed. Pappy Gunn's B-25 strafers, bristling with forward-firing 50-caliber machine guns, were transforming the B-25 from a medium bomber into a formidable ground attack platform capable of raking targets with unprecedented firepower. Meanwhile, Major Benn's skip bombing technique offered a precision, low-altitude attack method that could penetrate even the most heavily armored warship. Separately, they were powerful tools. Together, in Kenny's mind, they represented nothing short of a revolution in naval air combat. Kenny's strategic decision was swift and decisive. He envisioned a new breed of aircraft, not merely bombers, but specialized commerce destroyers. These machines would descend to mast height, their strafing guns ripping apart the superstructures and crews of Japanese vessels, while simultaneously delivering skip bombs with devastating accuracy below the waterline. This wasn't just about sinking ships, it was about shattering Japanese morale, disrupting their vital supply lines, and fundamentally altering the strategic landscape of the Pacific. General Kenny was forging the instruments of a nightmare specifically designed to hunt and annihilate. The morning of March 3, 1943, dawned not with a whimper, but with the roar of engines over the Bismarck Sea. This was the moment of reckoning. General Kenny's meticulously crafted plan, a symphony of destruction, began with a deceptive overture. High above the glistening, unsuspecting convoy, the first wave appeared, lumbering B-17 flying fortresses. These titans of the sky, though formidable in their own right, were not the true harbingers of doom this day. Their mission was calculated a dangerous ballet of misdirection. Soaring at altitudes of 20,000 feet and above, their silver wings glinting in the tropical sun, the B-17s were designed to be seen, to be noticed. Japanese spotters, their hearts surely sinking at the sight of enemy bombers, quickly relayed the intelligence. Admiral Kimura, perhaps with a grim satisfaction, would have ordered his fighter screen, the agile Zeros of the Imperial Japanese Navy, to intercept these high-altitude threats. Anti-aircraft guns on the convoy ships, already primed and bristling, would have roared to life, spewing flak into the azure expanse, creating deadly black clouds in the sky. This was precisely the desired effect. Every Zero climbing to meet the B-17s, every burst of anti-aircraft fire directed skyward, was a diversion. Each distraction, each moment of Japanese attention fixed on the distant, high-flying targets, cleared a crucial path. Unbeknownst to the Japanese command, the true menace was not descending from the heavens, but was already hugging the waves, concealed by the morning mist and the very horizon itself. As the B-17s drew the gaze and the fury of the enemy higher and higher, the stage was being meticulously cleared, not for a conventional bombing run, but for an unprecedented, brutal assault at mast height. The nightmare was about to begin.
High above, the B-17s had done their job, drawing the attention of the Japanese air defenses with their high-altitude passes and diversionary bombs. But below the clouds, the true instruments of destruction were not merely descending, they were plunging into the maelstrom. Inside the cockpits of the B-25 strafers, the atmosphere was thick with a cocktail of raw adrenaline and grim determination. These young American pilots, many barely out of their teens, were about to execute a mission unlike any ever conceived, a low-altitude assault that defied conventional wisdom. The thunderous roar of their twin radial engines, a symphony of power and impending doom, filled the cramped spaces, vibrating through their very bones. Each pilot gripped his controls, knuckles white, eyes scanning the horizon for the first terrifying glimpse of their prey. Alongside them, the RAAF Beaufighter crews, equally committed to this audacious plan, dove with predatory grace. Their twin-engined aircraft, known as the Whispering Death by their adversaries, were armed with devastating cannon and machine guns, ready to complement the B-25's torrent of lead. And then, there it was. Not a distant speck on the vast ocean, but a monstrous, steel-gray armada filling their windscreens. Japanese destroyers, bristling with anti-aircraft guns, and lumbering transport ships packed with thousands of soldiers and vital supplies suddenly materialized from the haze. The ships grew larger with terrifying speed, their decks a chaotic patchwork of crates, equipment, and unsuspecting men. This was not a high-altitude bombing run from a safe distance. This was a charge into the very maw of the beast, a gladiatorial contest where the arena was the unforgiving sea and the stakes were measured in human lives and the fate of a campaign. Down they plunged, shedding altitude with reckless abandon, aiming for mast height, the very surface of the water. The air became a chaotic blur of wind, sea spray, and the increasingly frantic bursts of enemy flak, now rising to meet them from below. This was it, the moment of truth. The descent into hell had begun, and the pilots, with a blend of terror and steely resolve, pushed their throttles forward, hurtling towards an unimaginable confrontation. The world outside the cockpit dissolved into a blur of gray ocean and white-capped waves. The B-25s, screaming across the surface at little more than mast height, became instruments of pure, unadulterated destruction. For the pilots, time itself seemed to stretch and contort. The vast expanse of the Bismarck Sea narrowed to a tunnel, at the end of which loomed the unsuspecting Japanese convoy, now terrifyingly close. Then, with a collective, thunderous roar, the storm was unleashed. 8.50 caliber machine guns, fixed forward, erupted from the nose of each Mitchell bomber, transforming the aircraft into a flying shotgun. A torrent of incandescent tracers, a blinding orange-red hail, tore through the air, carving deadly paths towards the Japanese ships. The sound within the cockpit was deafening, a visceral symphony of mechanical rage that vibrated through the very bones of the crew. The impact on the Japanese vessels was immediate and catastrophic. Decks, previously bustling with activity, were instantly scythed clean. The lead, traveling at incredible velocity, shredded wooden structures, punched through thin plating, and ricocheted wildly within the ship's superstructures. Anti-aircraft gunners, moments before bravely firing their pitiful bursts, found themselves enveloped in a maelstrom of metal. Their positions, exposed and vulnerable, were systematically targeted and silenced, often with the gunners still at their posts, cut down before they could even understand the nature of this unprecedented assault. Down they plunged, shedding altitude with reckless abandon, aiming for mast height, the very surface of the water. The air became a chaotic blur of wind, sea spray, and the increasingly frantic bursts of enemy flak, now rising to meet them from below. This was it, the moment of truth. The descent into hell had begun, and the pilots, with a blend of terror and steely resolve, pushed their throttles forward, hurtling towards an unimaginable confrontation. The world outside the cockpit dissolved into a blur of gray ocean and white-capped waves. The B-25s, screaming across the surface at little more than mast height, became instruments of pure, unadulterated destruction. For the pilots, time itself seemed to stretch and contort. The vast expanse of the Bismarck Sea narrowed to a tunnel, at the end of which loomed the unsuspecting Japanese convoy, now terrifyingly close. Then, with a collective, thunderous roar, the storm was unleashed. 8.50 caliber machine guns, fixed forward, erupted from the nose of each Mitchell bomber, transforming the aircraft into a flying shotgun. A torrent of incandescent tracers, a blinding orange-red hail, tore through the air, carving deadly paths towards the Japanese ships. The sound within the cockpit was deafening, a visceral symphony of mechanical rage that vibrated through the very bones of the crew. The impact on the Japanese vessels was immediate and catastrophic. Decks, previously bustling with activity, were instantly scythed clean. The lead, traveling at incredible velocity, shredded wooden structures, punched through thin plating, and ricocheted wildly within the ship's superstructures. Anti-aircraft gunners, moments before bravely firing their pitiful bursts, found themselves enveloped in a maelstrom of metal. Their positions, exposed and vulnerable, were systematically targeted and silenced, often with the gunners still at their posts, cut down before they could even understand the nature of this unprecedented assault.
From the perspective of a B-25 pilot, the scene below was both horrifying and mesmerizing. He could see individual figures on the decks, flailing, falling, as his plane's fury washed over them. He could discern the sudden cessation of enemy fire as his guns found their mark. Bridges were raked, command structures obliterated, and communication lines severed. The sea around the ships churned not just from the propellers of the attacking aircraft, but from the sheer volume of spent brass and shattered debris raining down from above. This was not mere strafing. It was the creation of a field of death on the water, a zone of absolute annihilation that no living thing could withstand. For the Japanese sailors, the initial shock gave way to uncomprehending terror. This wasn't the high-altitude, predictable bombing they had trained for. This was an attack from mere feet above the waves, with machine gun fire so dense it felt like a solid wall, tearing apart their ships and their comrades with brutal efficiency. The psychological impact was immense. Disbelief morphed into primal fear as they realized the utter helplessness of their situation. The skies, once a distant threat, had descended to engulf them in a metallic tempest. Meanwhile, in the cockpits of the B-25s, the pilots, though engulfed in the chaos, operated with a terrifying precision, their minds a blend of focused aggression and a chilling awareness of the carnage they were inflicting. They were the architects of a new kind of naval warfare, and the Bismarck Sea was their unforgiving canvas. On the bridge of the destroyer Shikinami, Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura, commander of the ill-fated Convoy, had initially observed the high-altitude B-17 attacks with a professional's cool assessment, perhaps even a touch of disdain. His ship's anti-aircraft guns barked, sending flak blooming harmlessly in the distant sky. This was warfare he understood. This was doctrine. But then the true nightmare descended. From the horizon, not high in the clouds, but skimming the very surface of the Bismarck Sea, came a swarm of aircraft unlike anything he had ever witnessed. These were not the conventional high-altitude bombers they had drilled against, nor the torpedo planes whose approach they could anticipate. These were American, and they were spitting fire. The roar of engines was deafening, a guttural shriek that heralded chaos. B-25 Mitchells, transformed into flying machine gun platforms, tore across the water at mast height, their 8 forward-firing .50 caliber guns stitching lines of death across the decks of the Japanese transports. Sailors, moments ago manning their stations, were scythed down like wheat, their lives extinguished in a hail of lead. Commander Yasuo Doi, standing beside Admiral Kimura, watched aghast as their escort destroyers, designed to repel torpedo boats and submarines, found themselves utterly helpless. The Japanese doctrine, honed over decades, was predicated on conventional air attacks from above or surface engagements. This was neither. This was an ambush from the sea-level sky, a relentless, point-blank assault. The sheer speed of the attack, the blurring fury of it all, left no time for coherent thought, let alone an effective response. Kimura, a veteran steeped in naval tradition, could only gaze in bewildered horror. His ships were being torn apart, not by bombs from on high, but by bullets and bombs skipping across the waves, ripping into them below the waterline. The very air seemed to crackle with lead. Where was the enemy? Not above, but amongst them. This wasn't war, it was an execution. The proud Japanese Navy, which had swept across the Pacific, now found itself utterly vulnerable, paralyzed by an innovation it couldn't comprehend and couldn't counter. In those terrifying minutes, as his convoy disintegrated around him, Rear Admiral Kimura stared into the abyss of a new kind of naval warfare, one for which he had no answer, only a profound and terrifying helplessness. The profound and terrifying helplessness that gripped Rear Admiral Kimura quickly escalated into a full-blown nightmare. What followed was not a battle in the conventional sense, but an obliteration, a savage demonstration of air power that would redefine naval engagement forever. From the moment the strafers descended, the entire engagement was compressed into a brutal, unrelenting 15 minutes. A fleeting span of time, yet for those caught within its inferno, it stretched into an eternity of unimaginable horror. The B-25s, their forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns spewing a torrent of lead, transformed into flying chainsaws, ripping apart anything in their path. Superstructures shattered, anti-aircraft positions were silenced in a hail of bullets, and exposed personnel were scythed down with merciless efficiency. The transports, already vulnerable, became veritable death traps, their decks awash in blood and splintered wood, their holds packed with men now suffocating or drowning as skip bombs tore gaping wounds below the waterline. Alongside them, the RAF bowfighters added their own deadly contribution, their 20mm cannons punching through holes, setting fires, and adding to the overwhelming destruction. The Japanese sailors, caught between the relentless strafing from above and the devastating skip bombs at the waterline, were utterly paralyzed. Their own anti-aircraft defenses, designed for high-altitude threats, were rendered useless against attackers operating at mast height, appearing and disappearing in the spray and smoke. It was a relentless, impossible assault. The initial shock quickly gave way to panic and then despair. Ships that had sailed with the pride of the Imperial Navy now listed helplessly, consumed by fire, their hulls breached, their crews abandoning ship into an oil-slicked sea teeming with sharks and the grim specter of death. When the last of the strafers finally peeled away, the Bismarck Sea told a stark, horrifying tale. 8 Japanese transports and 4 destroyers, the entire convoy, lay sunk or critically damaged. Over 3,000 Japanese soldiers, along with their entire complement of tanks, artillery, ammunition, and vital supplies destined for the besieged garrison at Lai, had vanished beneath the waves. This was not merely a defeat, it was a catastrophic strategic blow, an unmitigated disaster that irrevocably crippled Japan's efforts to reinforce New Guinea. The Allies had achieved a decisive victory, not just through firepower, but through sheer audacious innovation. The news that filtered back to the Imperial General Headquarters was not merely of a defeat, but of an annihilation so swift and brutal it defied comprehension. For Fleet Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of audacious strategic planning and the very man who had conceived the Pearl Harbor attack, the reports from the Bismarck Sea were a grim revelation, echoing with a chilling prophecy. He was a leader who understood the profound implications of air power, perhaps better than any other in the Japanese military, and he grasped the terrible significance instantly. This wasn't just about losing a convoy, it was about the fundamental, existential vulnerability of his surface fleet. His admirals had designed their defenses around traditional air attacks, high-altitude bombers whose trajectories were predictable, their bombs often evaded, their aircraft vulnerable to interceptors and heavy anti-aircraft fire. But the B-25 strafers, descending to mast height like vengeful specters, rendered these established doctrines obsolete. They were not merely dropping bombs, they were raking ships with an inferno of .50 rounds, turning steel into Swiss cheese and decks into charnel houses before delivering their devastating skip bombs. The sheer psychological terror of such a low-level concentrated assault, the sight of 1,000 rounds per minute tearing through the bridge, the engine room, the very heart of a vessel, created a panic and paralysis previously unimaginable.
The Battle of the Bismarck Sea forced a brutal, immediate reevaluation of naval doctrine across the entire Imperial Japanese Navy. No longer could convoys move with the same confidence, nor could ships rely solely on their anti-aircraft guns designed for distant targets. Yamamoto recognized that the battle had exposed a chasm in Japanese defensive capabilities, a gaping wound inflicted by American ingenuity that threatened to bleed Japanese logistics dry for the remainder of the war. It was a strategic shift, a forced acknowledgement that the advantage in the air, wielded with such lethal precision, could nullify even the strongest naval force. The skies had changed, and with them, the very nature of naval warfare. The nightmare from the cockpit had become the grim reality for the Imperial Japanese Navy. The inferno of the Bismarck Sea was more than just a battle, it was a crucible for a new kind of aerial warfare. The devastating success of the B-25 Streafer was not lost on Allied command. Its effectiveness was so profound, so utterly decisive, that the modifications pioneered by Pappy Gunn were rapidly standardized. What began as a field improvisation in the dusty airfields of Australia quickly became an official, battle-proven configuration, leading to the widespread deployment of these formidable aircraft across the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific. Suddenly, the skies over countless islands, previously thought secure for Japanese resupply, became killing zones.
The B-25 Strafer, bristling with forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns and capable of precision skip bombing, became the bane of Japanese logistics. Convoys, troop transports, and supply ships, once vital arteries for the Imperial Army and Navy, found themselves under relentless, low-altitude assault. This wasn't merely a tactical nuisance, it was a strategic chokehold, systematically strangling Japanese garrisons, denying them reinforcements, food, and ammunition, and profoundly altering the calculus of island hopping campaigns. The nightmare for the Japanese wasn't confined to Bismarck, it spread like a virulent disease across their supply lines. But the legacy of the B-25 Strafer extended far beyond the immediate exigencies of World War II. Its pioneering concept, a heavily armed aircraft designed for direct, sustained ground attack, laid the foundational blueprint for an entirely new class of military aviation. Think of the AC-47 Spooky, the legendary Puff the Magic Dragon of Vietnam, with its side-mounted miniguns showering targets below. Or its mighty successor, the AC-130 Spectre gunship, a flying fortress of fire, raining down cannon fire with astonishing accuracy. And then there is the iconic A-10 Warthog, purpose-built around its gargantuan GAU-8 Avenger Gatling gun, a modern-day embodiment of the Strafer spirit, designed to tear tanks apart with its sheer volume of fire. Each of these aerial behemoths, born decades after the B-25 carved its legend into the waves of the Bismarck Sea, carries the genetic code of Pappy Gunn's ingenuity. The B-25 Strafer was not just a weapon of its time, it was a visionary proof of concept, a testament to the enduring power of adapting existing platforms for specialized, devastating effect. It forever reshaped the role of air power in close air support and interdiction, leaving an indelible mark on military doctrine and aircraft design that continues to influence modern warfare. Yet, to fully grasp the profound impact of the Bismarck Sea, we must look beyond the immediate triumph, acknowledging that this victory was not solely an American endeavor. The Royal Australian Air Force, with its formidable Beaufighters, played a crucial and often overlooked role, flying alongside the B-25s, their cannons raking enemy decks and suppressing anti-aircraft fire, creating vital windows for the American strafers and bombers. This was a testament to combined Allied ingenuity and courage, a synergy that amplified the devastation wrought upon the Japanese convoy. Suddenly, the skies over countless islands, previously thought secure for Japanese resupply, became killing zones. The B-25 Strafer, bristling with forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns and capable of precision skip bombing, became the bane of Japanese logistics. Convoys, troop transports, and supply ships, once vital arteries for the Imperial Army and Navy, found themselves under relentless, low-altitude assault. This wasn't merely a tactical nuisance, it was a strategic chokehold, systematically strangling Japanese garrisons, denying them reinforcements, food, and ammunition, and profoundly altering the calculus of island-hopping campaigns. The nightmare for the Japanese wasn't confined to Bismarck, it spread like a virulent disease across their supply lines. But the legacy of the B-25 Strafer extended far beyond the immediate exigencies of World War II. Its pioneering concept, a heavily armed aircraft designed for direct, sustained ground attack, laid the foundational blueprint for an entirely new class of military aviation. Think of the AC-47 Spooky, the legendary Puff the Magic Dragon of Vietnam, with its side-mounted miniguns showering targets below. Or its mighty successor, the AC-130 Spectre gunship, a flying fortress of fire, raining down cannon fire with astonishing accuracy. And then there is the iconic A-10 Warthog, purpose-built around its gargantuan GAU-8 Avenger Gatling gun, a modern-day embodiment of the Strafer's spirit, designed to tear tanks apart with its sheer volume of fire. Each of these aerial behemoths, born decades after the B-25 carved its legend into the waves of the Bismarck Sea, carries the genetic code of Pappy Gunn's ingenuity. The B-25 Strafer was not just a weapon of its time. It was a visionary proof of concept, a testament to the enduring power of adapting existing platforms for specialized, devastating effect. It forever reshaped the role of air power in close air support and interdiction, leaving an indelible mark on military doctrine and aircraft design that continues to influence modern warfare.
Indeed, the battle was not just a singular event, but a crucible of continuous technical development. The lessons learned in those harrowing minutes over the Bismarck Sea fueled further refinements, solidifying the B-25 Strafer's design and tactics, ensuring its evolution into an even more potent weapon that would terrorize Japanese shipping across the Pacific. But behind every innovation, every strategic success, lies an immeasurable human cost. The American B-25 crews, the young men who piloted these metal birds into a maelstrom of anti-aircraft fire, bore the brunt of this brutal new form of warfare. Flying at mast height, directly into a hail of bullets and shells, their missions were not merely dangerous, they were suicidal in their audacity. Imagine the courage, or perhaps the sheer terror, of watching tracer rounds streak towards your cockpit, knowing that one slight miscalculation, one unlucky hit, could send you plummeting into the unforgiving ocean below. These pilots faced direct, unyielding resistance, enduring the horrifying spectacle of their comrades' planes erupting in flames, yet they pressed on, delivering their deadly payload with unwavering resolve. Their bravery, often overshadowed by the tactical brilliance of the commanders, was the true engine of this victory, a profound sacrifice that etched the nightmare from the cockpit into the annals of aerial combat. The fires of the Bismarck Sea may have been extinguished and the cries of the doomed convoy silenced, but the echoes of that horrific day reverberated far beyond the shattered hulls. What emerged from the Inferno was more than just a battle won, it was the birth of a legend forged in lead and fire. The B-25 Strafer, initially a conventional medium bomber, was transformed by sheer necessity and audacious innovation into a specialized instrument of maritime destruction. This was American ingenuity at its most brilliant and brutal, taking an existing platform and re-engineering it to meet a dire strategic need, creating a weapon system that was utterly without precedent. Its tactical flexibility redefined air-to-sea warfare. No longer content with high-altitude precision bombing, which often proved ineffective against maneuvering ships, the B-25 Strafer plunged to mast height. There, it unleashed a devastating storm of concentrated .50 caliber machine gun fire, scything through decks, bridges, and anti-aircraft crews, before delivering its skip bombs with pinpoint accuracy. This deadly combination proved to be a pivotal factor in turning the tide against Japan in the Pacific. It crippled their logistics, isolated their garrisons, and shattered their confidence in the ability of their naval assets to operate safely, even under air cover. The Strafer forced the Imperial Japanese Navy to confront a new, terrifying reality, one where the skies, even at sea level, could become an inescapable killing zone. Indeed, the B-25 Strafer became, quite literally, the nightmare from the cockpit. For the Japanese, it was a terrifying apparition, a low-flying metal beast that descended from nowhere, spewing fire and death, turning their ships into floating infernos in mere seconds. The psychological shock was immense, paralyzing, and utterly demoralizing. But this nightmare was not theirs alone. For the brave American and Australian pilots, it was a different kind of terror, the nightmare of flying into a wall of flak, of navigating through a storm of return fire at treetop level, of witnessing the devastation they wrought, and of constantly pushing the boundaries of their own courage and endurance. Their cockpits, though offering a vantage point of overwhelming power, were also crucibles of immense stress and danger. In its twin roles as an instrument of ingenious adaptation and a harbinger of terror, the B-25 Strafer stands as an enduring symbol of World War II. It encapsulates the relentless drive for innovation born from conflict, the profound human cost of warfare, and the decisive impact of strategic tactical shifts. The legacy of the B-25 Strafer at the Bismarck Sea endures, a testament to how a single, audacious idea, executed with courage and precision, can forever alter the course of history.